Hey guys, this is Rico Figliolini, host of Peachtree Corners Life, and this show, Prime Lunchtime, with the city manager, Brian Johnson. Hey, Brian.
How are you?
Good, good. There's so many things to talk about. It's unbelievable. I feel so futuristic and near future stuff that's going on in this city. But before we get into all that, I just want to say thank you to some of our sponsors. Prototype Prime here has supported us through this podcast studio to be able to do some of these podcasts here, so I do want to mention that and thank them. This place is phenomenal, and in fact, I really should refer to this whole organization really as Curiosity Lab at Peachtree Corners, because that's really what it's about, and Prototype Prime is just a part of that now. So I want to thank them for that here in the city of Peachtree Corners and in Technology Park. Also, a big supporter of ours is CMX Cine Bistro. They're a luxury dinner and a movie theater with reserved seating. Beautiful, beautiful place. Really a 4-star restaurant that shows movies. You can actually probably just go there and have dinner and be good. But they have great food, great cocktails. Everything's done from scratch. All their desserts. Great place to be. Great first-run movies. They're showing some decent movies, some really good movies this weekend. I wish I knew offhand which ones they were, but I'll check on the website and you'll find that. Go to cinebistro.com and look up Peachtree Corners. Great stuff there. Good organic ingredients to their food. Excellent. And last but not least is Explore Gwinnett. It's the city's tourism, more than that, but tourism bureau, if you will, that talks about the city, the diversity here, the foods. They do Soul of Korea, which is a great food tour of the Korean restaurants here in Gwinnett County. Just one of many things the city does. And we do a top 10 list with them. You can find that on our website. In fact, you could go to PeachtreeCornersLife.com or our newest site, LivingInPeachtreeCorners.com. And of course, the magazine is hosted there as well. I do want to also tell you that we are now, Peachtree Corners Magazine is a sponsor of the Smart City Expo Atlanta. It's the first North American exposure of this big expo that's done internationally in Barcelona. It's about all things smart city, everything that you can imagine that deals with businesses and the people on the street and making life sustainable, smart, where everything talks to each other, where life can be better maximized, if you will, through the services of a city done smartly. And which ties into what we're going to be talking about, because Brian just came back from Israel. So there's that. There's the Smart City Expo that's happening here in September at the Georgia World Conference Center. And we're going to be, I think, an off-site demo site for the 1.7 mile track that we have, and autonomous track. And so let's just jump into it. It's Israel.
Well, before that, so the link here, we got our big, if you want to call it, opportunity on the international stage with the Smart City Expo World Congress in Barcelona last year.
That's right.
We were asked by the Metro Atlanta Chamber to join them and be part of the U.S. delegation to go over there and talk about what we're doing here.
Right.
And it was at that expo that I met a lady who works for the Israel Innovation Institute. And this institute hosts a annual mobility conference.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asked to speak at the mobility conference.
Okay.
And was sponsored to go over to Tel Aviv for this conference. And so I was just there last week with my assistant city manager. We went over there and we did two things. One is the day of the conference, we had, we were involved in some of the interactive discussions there, everything from, working groups getting together. I was on a live, international live feed on question and answer from startups on what different countries are doing to help facilitate that.
Right.
And put it in perspective, I followed on one of my my talks with I followed Henry Ford's great grandson, Bill Ford, the current chairman of Ford Motor Company.
Okay.
So they had some big names there, so it was impressive. And then we worked with the Israeli Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
and an organization called Connex, which is a organization whose primary mission is to link American and Israeli companies together. And the remaining days that we were over there, we ultimately met with 37 different organizations who have some interest in ultimately our facility here. And they were everything from startups themselves. There's some unique startups that are looking to get into the American market or test at a facility that is affordable to test, or test at a facility that has the technology necessary to do that. We met with some other incubators that are interested in maybe creating some sort of a pipeline between Prototype Prime and or even the entire Curiosity Lab in them. And then the last one is we met with a number of government agencies over there who are very interested in creating a long-term partnership in which, especially from their perspective, the nation of Israel is got about the same market size as Metro Atlanta. So when you create something over there, and they have a very vibrant, healthy startup and innovation environment over there. But what they all share is when they do get something created, they don't have the market to really make it. There's just not enough people.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
they got to go to Asia, Europe, or North America.
Right.
So we were an interesting opportunity for them to again establish a relationship with a municipality that's in a big metro market. But what really interests them is the fact that, as an economic development initiative, we're not doing this because, it's not a business model for us.
Right.
So we're not like, okay, you come over here, we're going to charge you by the hour.
Right, different.
We're not interested in intellectual property, which some cases are like, all right, you can go over here, but we want percentage of what you create out of this.
Right.
And we also are in a position where we can properly protect and even keep confidential proprietary information that some companies may want to test here, but then they don't want their competitors to know certain things about their testing.
Right.
So, and then of course, all of that is combined with the fact that you can use the facility for free as long as you meet certain criteria.
Right.
And we're the only level of government that needs to give people permission. Which, like in Europe, we would have a hard time in some cases competing with a few locations in Europe because they're way ahead of us when it comes to some of the mobility stuff. But they are very heavily regulated, lots of layers of regulatory stuff, all the way up to the European Union. And when they hear that, wait a second, you don't have to get other levels of government. And Georgia is actually, if you look at it, one of the most friendly states to do autonomous vehicle testing in the country because of maybe it's more of lack of regulation. It is
Because
slightly
it's new,
regulated,
because it's
right?
Yeah.
But there are some states that prohibit it, some states heavily regulate it. A lot of states force you to register at the state level first and go through a bunch of hoops before you can.
Yeah.
So Georgia's done it right so far. We're in a good position. But anyway, that third group over there, these organizations, Israeli organizations that are interested in this partnership, are thinking, look, we might be able to cultivate and foster technology in Israel. And then if they have a product and it gets to a certain point, then we have a relationship with somebody in America that can either A, help take something that's been created and tested in a closed, controlled environment. What we oftentimes say is our living laboratory is where you go when your technology is graduated from the closed, controlled environment. You got to crawl before you walk and walk before you run. We are the walk. So when you're done crawling in that in that isolated, controlled environment, you can't go and immediately start running in a downtown Atlanta.
And it wouldn't work
Too
there.
complicated, you
Right.
couldn't insure it, too dangerous,
And
all
five-
that
and
other stuff.
5G is not even available.
Well, and then
out
there
at
you
this
go, I
point,
mean,
so-
some of that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and so we offer that crawl
Yeah.
phase. And so Israeli, these, government agencies and in some cases cities over there are like, wow, we could send companies over, they can either test, or if they're beyond testing, they can demonstrate into the American market,
It almost
let
becomes
people.
a showroom for other
Absolutely.
cities to come see what's out there. And that's a great place to be, being a showroom like
It
that.
is, and so we're talking about maybe we create our own once a year type of event
Yeah,
where we have delegations come over, and so as a country, Israel's unique again in that it not only has a very vibrant startup community, but it just doesn't have enough population for
Sure,
that
the
to stay
the
there.
marketplace,
Right.
yeah.
Waze was invented there.
It's a lot
But
of
as
stuff.
soon as, a lot. I mean, we could go down the list, but I mean,
Yeah.
we talked to some people who were involved in the initial launch, and they got it. They tested it a few places, but for them to really monetize it, they had to go to the big market,
Yeah.
and they
I
have to
mean, and the
leave.
big markets are U.S., China,
Yeah,
Europe.
Asia, Europe,
Asia,
North
right,
America,
right.
and that's where they're headed. So we feel like we're in a really good place. So it's somewhat overwhelming but exciting that we got back, and we met with 37 different organizations, and about half of them have, in an unsolicited manner, reached out before we even had a chance to say, hey, great meeting you. Let's keep this going. Don't
Right.
forget about us. We're really interested. So there's going to be some exciting partnership opportunities we'll be announcing as we kind of get some of these things to
And
coalesce.
it'll probably come out slowly, but and I think the last release I saw was about the Ray.
It was, and we've had that for month and a half.
Okay.
We are trying to a degree pace ourselves. Also, if you have a partnership, sometimes the other partner has kind of some timing that is their sweet spot. And so,
Right.
yes, we just announced our partnership with Array, and that's the 18-mile section of I-85 from the Alabama state line to LaGrange. And so they're a rural interstate version of
What we're
our
doing, yeah.
doing here. And so we're going to be sharing users, sharing technology and innovation, and in some cases, like we've talked about before with the solar panel in the roadway,
Right.
the Ray would potentially be actually call it a customer of ours for a period of time, where we let them take one of their partners that makes the solar panels, and we build a solar road. We put solar panels on top of the road, let the cars drive over it,
Right.
while it's actually generating real electricity, feeding into the electric
Interesting.
vehicle charging stations we have at the front of City Hall. So we'll be testing a scenario in which if you had an electric vehicle, you could be driving to the City Hall charging station over the very solar field that's generating the electricity to
Interesting.
feed your
Right.
car through the.
And there's
That's
other
pretty cool.
technology that actually will allow a recharging of batteries while you're even driving.
Yes,
through
so
the,
we've been involved in some of the industry, the battery, and yes, there's some talk about having a couple of sections here where we create almost like a removable test pad, where it's almost like a concrete section that you can lift out of the road and it sits there, and when you lift it out, you can place sensors and other things and then drop it back into the road. And so one of the things that they
Interesting,
like to
okay.
test is coils in the road,
Yeah.
so that electric vehicles are actually charging themselves
Right.
while they drive right
That's
over the
what I heard,
coils.
yeah.
And so, I mean, the sky's the limit with this stuff. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
So it was exciting. It was a great opportunity. Met again with Connex and the Israeli government really laying out the red carpet and being interested in this. We've come back with a lot of renewed interest. And again, we keep coming back to the one thing that we all have to remind ourselves as residents and taxpayers here, because it gets asked a lot. In fact, even when I talk to other companies and I lay out our offer, they're kind of like, where's the catch? This is too good to be true. They're
Right.
like, what's in it for you? And I say, activity's in it for us. So if we had somebody come here for just one day, do something. They still got to eat lunch somewhere. So they're
Right.
going to go to one of our restaurants. If
Mhm.
they're here for 2 days and 1 night, they're going to stay in one of our hotels.
Right.
If they're here for a couple weeks, maybe they've got space here at Prototype Prime.
Mhm.
Maybe it's months, and maybe they have a convention at one of our, and then at
Or
the,
satellite offices.
right.
or
And so when you
whatever.
take it to it, to the conclusion, we may be having buildings
Mhm.
in Tech Park
Right.
or in Greater Peachtree Corners, Greater Metro Atlanta,
Mhm.
that are filled by a company who would not have necessarily come here if it had not been for this asset.
And things can evolve. I mean, you know that, because when this first started out, it was very different from
Oh,
where you
yeah.
are now, and you knew that. So who's to say in a year or 2 years from now, depending on how the expansion happens and such, that we may charge, we may provide certain benefits like that to us, because you can improve on what you're doing. This is not an end-all thing. This is
No,
something
it
that's
is
gonna
not. And
evolve.
yes, I do not have never said that it'll never be a pay to play scenario. If we certainly get enough activity where people are waiting in line or whatever,
Right,
we
then-
certainly will consider it as a pay to play endeavor.
And-
Right now, it's the term loss leader.
Yeah.
Sometimes first to the market, you got to get them in. But remember, we've got a narrow window.
Mm-hmm.
We were a combination of both fortunate and some smart decisions. We ultimately got into a situation where we have technology, including a 5G backbone,
Right.
wireless backbone,
Yeah.
earlier than anybody else.
Yeah.
And you combine that with all the other tech we're putting in here, we are out in front. Our intent is to try to lock up as many relationships.
And this is why you have to do it without charge.
That's correct.
Right.
Right now
That
is
makes
lock
sense.
it up
Sure.
because one day, probably sooner than we like, City X out there
Uh-huh.
could already be planning to do that
Oh,
right now. Be
sure.
like, you know what we ought to do?
Yeah.
And City X could have an even better asset. Maybe they have a longer track. Maybe they have wider lanes. Maybe they have more. I mean
You
who
have,
knows?
You have, was it Planet M in Michigan? I mean, the idea
M
that
City.
M
Yes,
City.
yes.
The idea that Michigan is not leading in something like this, Detroit is not leading in something like this, is almost ridiculous when you think about Motor City
It is,
or
but
former Motor City.
M City and some of the other ones like Gomentum
Yes.
out in California.
Right.
Those are the reasons why we didn't try to do anything closed. There's a lot of closed tracks and facilities
for
that
sure.
you can create. But again, what the cradle to grave
Mm-hmm.
or the cradle to market space-time continuum is missing
Yeah.
is that walk phase. There's not a
Great. That was definitely a great decision to move it that way. To
a
find niche.
living environment, or a living laboratory where it's not too complicated.
Mhm.
We do have people, so there is enough to make it to where you're like, okay, we're getting real, but it's not like Midtown where
Right.
you're just like, okay, we can't. It's
Correct.
just too.
Yeah.
So but we just know that we have a window.
Yeah.
It will, before too long, 5G will be everywhere, and it won't be special. So we've got our foot on the gas right now to try to line up these partnerships and get this activity really interested. So one day if City X comes in and tries to lure a company from here, they're like, hey, it looks like you got to go, but we got a
Right.
relationship over here.
Right.
We're set up here. We may even have a permanent place here. We're not going to go to your
Right, or like we said, that things evolve. So from these relationships, you're finding, just like you did over the past year and a half, that you may find businesses come here to say that will be brainstorming with us, with the city, and say, you know what, we could do this, this, and this. Why don't we expand it a little bit? Why don't we add some other component to it that maybe you guys didn't think of? That just increases the value of what we're doing.
It does. We don't know. Look, I can just use Sprint as an example.
Right.
And Georgia Power will soon be another example. Sprint is an example of, because the city made the decision to do this,
Mhm.
it was so enticing to Sprint that they were willing to not only put in 5G network ahead of everybody else on their dime,
Right, on their dime, yeah.
but
true.
then there is money coming back to the city because of their
franchise?
because of
Really?
their
Okay.
relationship
Okay,
with us,
right.
and they are the exclusive. They have an exclusive wireless relationship with the city for this mile and a half. Now,
Mhm.
anywhere else in the city there isn't, but it was worth something. So we wouldn't have gotten 5G as early as we did.
Right.
We may not have gotten companies like ASHRAE, who's made
Mm-hmm.
moved their world headquarters and wanting to create the building of the future
Right.
here in Tech Park. If
Right.
it had not been for the fact that they were like, wait a second, they've got all this
Yes.
tech that we can tie into, we can
Yes.
get expertise with, we can partner with. So it's paying dividends.
I don't think I'm exaggerating when I think of the World's Fair in 1964, where you had pavilions of products of the future. And that's almost how I feel Technology Park can be.
Yes.
With these companies moving in, rebuilding some of these buildings towards a smart, sustainable future. And you have a place like the track, and you have other things going on here. It is almost like that World's Fair of Technology that this place can be. I mean, if just handling.
We
it
hope so.
right.
By the way, you're dating yourself with World's
Yes, I know.
Fairs.
I was young. I was a little kid.
I actually was in a Boy Scout troop
Uh-huh.
and was in a parade at the '82 World's Fair in Knoxville, Tennessee,
Oh,
which
really?
may have been the last. I don't even know if
Yes.
there's one since then.
And I think Atlanta needs to do a World's Fair here, but I don't know if they would do it.
But
at
I don't
the
even know. I
location.
don't think they do it anymore.
Why not? You're right. They don't. But why not? Is the
Well, I think
word
probably
next time.
because, let's say we had some awesome technology right here.
Uh-huh.
We don't need people to come to us to see it. You could be live streaming, and somebody from China could be watching
But
this.
let me
or-
tell you something. I can see a World's Fair being here of technology where you walk into the Facebook pavilion and you are wearing Oculus lenses and you're in a huge facility
That would
that's
be cool.
completely
Augmented
virtual,
reality and virtual
completely
reality stuff.
virtual, and you could be walking around,
Yeah, you're right.
a real place and doing real things. That's one way for Oculus Rift to be able to sell.
You
their
can
stuff.
never replicate being in person.
No,
You're right about
no.
that.
The
I mean,
idea to be able to step in whatever it is, and even sitting into an autonomous vehicle that shuttles you within that expo. I mean, it's just like there's so much that can be done. So someone just needs to think about doing it.
Well, you're right. I mean, like when Phantom Auto first got to us,
Mm-hmm.
they teleoperate. I could have tried to envision what it felt like. I could have seen a video of what it looked like.
Yeah.
I could have even stood next to the car and seen it do this. But until you're in a car
Right.
where there's nobody in the driver's seat
Mm-hmm.
and it pulls out
Yep.
and drives down the Las Vegas Strip
Uh-huh.
at the Consumer Electronics Show, and you're sitting in the passenger seat and there's nobody there. It's being driven by somebody in Silicon Valley,
Okay.
sitting with
Uh-huh.
until you experience that real. You're right. It loses something
Correct.
versus if you just saw a video of it happening.
Yeah, and I think that
You're right.
I mean, there's a consumer base that would enjoy being able to see these things. And this is why that expo in September, the Smart City Expo in Atlanta, that is that offshoot of the Barcelonian World
Yep.
Expo, is important too. So let's talk
It
a little bit
is.
about
So the annual one you talked about when we were last November got so big that Fear of Barcelona that organizes it said, let's set up regional affiliate conferences.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an Asian Smart City Expo, there's a Europe one, and then there's a North American one. And Atlanta got the very first.
that. Now, is that going to be an annual thing in Atlanta, do you know?
It's
'Cause
going
I
to
don't
be
even
an
know that.
annual thing in North America.
Okay.
I don't know if Atlanta locked it in long term, or they're
Okay.
going to like make it competitive, or what.
Okay.
I would love it if it was here all
Yeah,
the time.
sure.
But I know there was a lot of hard work by a lot of people. The one I know for sure was involved was somebody who's been very much a huge proponent of ours, and that's Cynthia Curry with the Metro Atlanta Chambers IoT
Yeah.
department, and
Yeah.
she been a huge proponent of ours. Was the one who invited us to Barcelona last time, so they did a lot of work to get it, and so we're excited that you got a chance to be a part of the,
Yeah,
and
excited.
we have a chance to do the same thing. We have been named as an official offsite demonstration location. So the
Exciting.
morning of the Wednesday morning, the conference starts on September 11th.
Mhm.
We'll have an event here
Mhm.
at Curiosity Lab, in which we'll have some demonstration of some of the companies that have some cutting edge tech in mobility and other stuff.
Mhm.
And we're going to also make it our official ribbon cutting for Curiosity Lab.
Oh, nice.
So we'll be announcing some of the, really big muckety mucks that'll, come to these kind of events. But we got
Right,
some big
right.
names that'll be here to help us, create, because we've created something that doesn't exist in the country. So certainly the state of Georgia should be proud to have something that nowhere else in the country
Yeah,
has.
I would think. And it's going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting to see what goes on there. All right, so let's pull it all back from the world back to City of Peachtree Corners, even further, because we had a city council meeting last night.
We do. We can't forget about why we really exist as a city, and
That's
that's to make sure that Peachtree Corners is a good place to live, work, learn, and play.
Right. Right.
So the most important document mayor and council ever approve is the annual budget.
Mhm.
It's the guide that keeps staff, direct staff and what we do on a day-to-day basis, how much resource we put to everything. And so we had that yesterday or last night, went through, the pretty typical, the process. We, of course, start our budget process, 6 months ago.
Sure.
And, council starts giving us some big picture priorities, and then staff starts,
Anything bigger that was in the budget that came in the last 6 months that
since then, two things of note beyond some of the typical stuff. Of course, those of you, who have lived here long enough, they know that, there are some pretty typical things council does. We usually put $1.5 million in resurfacing every year.
Mhm.
We put in, about $500,000 into sidewalk
right.
every year. So we set aside certain things, and then we have certain, specific capital improvement projects that we're involved in.
And we're doing, you guys took over the water, the city took over the water. Stormwater.
Yes.
So
So now
the-
all the drainage is our responsibility.
Right. So the projects being developed for that also?
There are, that's twofold. One is assessing the current
Yeah.
drainage system.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so knowing where our next repairs or improvements or
Right.
really the next maintenance needs to be before it becomes a repair. That's
Right.
our
like
goal.
Peachtree Station happened.
Flip and trail.
Flip and trail.
Yes,
Yeah.
that literally was a sinkhole that happened as Gwinnett County was handing us the baton.
Right.
In fact, they were evaluating it for trouble as they were saying, okay, it's yours now. And literally a sinkhole happened, and so yes, we got it. But so we've really got our arms wrapped around that. So now we're doing the maintenance. We have some bigger projects, but so in the capital improvement project list for the upcoming fiscal year, which starts Monday, probably the big ticket ones would be, probably led by the pedestrian bridge.
Right. Now, when is that breaking ground? I hear different things, but someone said a month from now, but
2 weeks, week
2
and a
weeks.
half.
Really? Okay. We're breaking ground, actually, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, there's really not a lot left to do prior to breaking ground and doing some site work, and it'll be some site work for a little while, and then they got compaction they've got to do, and they got certain things like that. So, going vertical, it could be a while.
Okay.
You're going to end up having the 2 towers built first, so you'll see the 2 towers coming up.
Uh-huh.
The span
Right.
will be prefabricated off-site and trucked in
Okay.
and pieced together.
Okay.
So it's not the same way that one in Florida was
Yeah,
done.
no, I'm sure.
This is
Yeah.
prefabricated steel
Yeah.
off-site. It's not poured concrete on a. But so the 2 towers will come up out of the ground to a point where you can lay the span in.
Mhm.
The 2 towers in the current phase have a stairway
Mhm.
and an elevator.
Okay.
So they're ADA compliant. It's a little bit larger of an elevator, so you could get a bicycle in if you wanted. And so the towers will get to a certain point. They'll lay the span in, and then once the span is in and locked in, then we'll finish up with the nice pretty stuff that you put
Right.
on the outside. And probably of note would be one of the more unique things. Of course, the 2 towers are very modest now.
Mhm.
They're not
They're not the
they're not
grand,
opulent,
They're not opulent, okay.
but they look good. I mean, because again, this is an above ground feature
Right.
that everybody's going to see. It's kind of a gateway into the city.
Yeah, I mean, you want it to look good.
We do, and
not
so-
institutional.
So one of the things that we had some help with that I think is a pretty cool way to achieve a requirement from DOT is Georgia DOT, which State Route 141
Yeah,
is owned
sure.
by the state. When you span it, they have some requirements for the fencing on the bridge to prevent people from either themselves going over or
Right.
throwing something over.
Yeah,
So there's a requirement for a 10-foot tall, essentially fence
yeah,
with minimum size openings in it. So a chain link could, I believe that essentially meets the intent.
but that's not what's happening.
Well, we did not want that.
No.
So what we did is we experimented and looked at some ways to do this a little bit better. And what we've done is found, or there's a company that's going to take, I can't remember what material, maybe aluminum sheets or whatever, and they're going to punch holes in it
Hmm.
in a pattern.
Yeah,
So if you're on the bridge, it's almost like a screen door. So you
Okay.
look through a screen door. If you get close enough, you can see through it because there's so many little holes.
right,
If you get far away, it changes your perspective. In our case, if you're on the bridge,
uh-huh.
all of these little holes will allow you to see out so you can have a view. If you're on the ground at a distance, all these holes
Yeah.
will have formed City of Peachtree Corners
Well, that's a
in
cool
letters,
way of doing that.
including a little leaf for the trees at
Right,
the end. So
right.
from a distance, it'll say that in
Uh-huh.
perforations,
Sure,
but those holes,
Mm-hmm.
they're small enough that they meet Georgia DOT's requirement on that, but they're frequent enough
right.
that when you're up against it, you'll be
Right.
able to see out really just
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
pretty well. You don't
It's
feel
just-
like it's
It's,
obstructed.
it's like a wrap on a bus, on a city
That's
bus.
correct.
It's the same way. So you stand further away, you see the message, you're inside the bus, you can actually still see out. So, yeah. I can
That's
see that.
exactly right. So I'm pretty excited about how that's going to look because it's a way to achieve the safety aspect.
Right, and still look pretty.
And still look pretty, and still actually say something
Functional.
on their app. Yes. So we're excited about that. But so that was that's probably the one that everybody's like.
Now, there's an additional, there'll be ramps at some point, I would imagine.
It is in
It's in the
our
budget.
CIP now.
Okay,
It's
but
not
no-
in the next year's right away. Now, just that's interesting you bring it up because we've put a pause on that for a number of reasons. Probably the most important one is we are, now that we've gone into the execution phase of one bridge, we have started on looking at the
All the
southern,
roads,
yes. So there may be to where we push the ramps out a little farther so we can do another bridge sooner. So we are starting to look at that.
And that's gonna be from, so that people have an idea, that's from the Target or Dick's area. going
That would be
across.
that area across to where
Chick-fil-A
Aldi's
and
and
so
Chick-fil-A and all that kind of stuff are, So there's a lot of variables to where
Yeah.
you do it. Who owns what? Are you creating problems by
Right.
putting landings
Right.
somewhere? If somebody gets off the stairs of the elevator, where do they go from there? Are they in the
Right.
middle of a parking lot? And
Right.
that's dangerous. So, but it's just important to note that we have now transitioned to starting to do some due diligence on that location
Oh, okay.
because there is certainly a noticeable stream of pedestrians that cross down there for various reasons.
Sure.
So we want to try to look at.
Let me ask you something, not that it has to do with the city or what we're talking necessarily about, but the Prada. And I just noticed that in the Gwinnett Daily Post, they were talking about Gwinnett Place Mall, that area, and what's called the Prada, and they showed some elevation plans of what's really actually a nice looking facility, a nice looking livable work and play type area where there's offices, retail, residential, I don't know if it's apartments or condos, it's a whole big thing. They even had an ice rink in it. And and that's 4 stories, 5 stories, that's almost a city look and city look and feel to it. And that's Gwinnett Place Mall. Was there anything along those lines for Peachtree Corners, like looking that
Like
way?
mixed use?
Yes, in even the southern part of like 141 or on Holcomb Bridge Road or Jimmy Carter.
Oh,
Is there anything
certainly.
new? Is there anything new?
Well, not that tangible enough that I'm like, it's for sure happening
Okay.
type of thing. No.
Okay.
We are looking there. The problem you sometimes get into, like in the case of the Gwinnett Place Mall, it may be actually a good example. Gwinnett Place Mall has gotten a reputation now that wasn't, it's gone through a cycle.
Yes.
And property values there are not what they were,
Yeah, it was suppressed,
initially.
sure.
It is suppressed. So when you have suppressed property values that are suppressed enough that somebody can come in and acquire property at such a reduced cost that now they have leftover that they can demo something existing and then build
Right,
something new.
right. That is true. It is a
Until
difference.
you are there, it's difficult. So what we have done and will continue to do is there are some locations in maybe the outer Peachtree Corners Circle area, Holcomb Bridge Road, that we think are maybe somewhat ripe to do something similar to that. The problem is we can't quite close the gap between the number that it needs to be for a developer to acquire it at a low enough cost, even when the city looks to try to provide incentives.
Okay.
There's still a gap because the purchase price of our properties is still so high.
Yes.
Because like in cases of large apartment complexes, there's no vacancy.
Yeah.
And so the owner, in some cases,
Not
they're like, "Look,
incentivized.
I'm prepared to sell you this. Everybody has a price, and they're like, I have a price." When you get down to it, they're basically like, "Look, I am sitting on a money-making investment here. So for me to unload it, I've got to get enough that I'm willing to give up this asset that's making money for me every year." And that price is just a little bit too high for the city to be able to incentivize it and close the gap. And so that's the one.
Yeah, and in that area, you're right. Gwinnett Place was a bad example as far as that goes, as far as property values, because you're right, it's suppressed. This is going to be a $250 million development, and they accumulated enough land to be able to do it. So yeah, I can see that.
There are a couple. I mean, we still have a few. Of course, we know Fiserv. That's going to be unique. We know the property behind Black Walnut and Chase Bank and everything.
Might
Is
be. I mean,
yes,
still-
it's your boutique hotel,
Right.
and so there's still some opportunity there. The Governor's Lake area
That's,
is probably the best when it comes to there's property that's not been developed ever yet, and
it's about
so
90 acres or something, 80 acres. I mean,
yeah,
fairly large.
it's a pretty large, absolutely. And so that one might be one where we find that we can close a gap and get somebody interested in doing something. We've had some talks, so we're always looking at that. But again, one thing last night you got to remember is council, got elected and have tried to commit to not having mission creep and having government do a lot like you oftentimes see. And because of that, we've been able to maintain, we're going into our 7th year without city property tax,
Right.
which is mostly good.
Uh-huh.
The only downside to that is cities that do collect property tax oftentimes have discretionary revenue that they can sometimes do big things with. So, you generate a lot of property tax revenue, you can go out and buy up a bunch of property and then turn around and sell it for a reduced cost to a developer so that they can do, it's happened in Marietta and it's happened in other places where they've purchased
Instead of taking on debt, they're using cash.
or even debt, and then they're using the property tax to pay it back. But my point is they generate a significant amount of revenue beyond, in some cases, what they provide directly. And so they have more money to, for lack of a better term, play with when it comes to those kind of things. We don't. Mayor and council are glad to be able to say that we don't have a lot of discretionary because of no property tax. But we could go into some of these and pay a lot of money and acquire it, and then turn around and sell it to a developer at a low enough dollar amount that they can do what we want. But we're losing money at that point, and
Right.
you can only do that when you're.
Yeah, true enough. And to some degree, that's what the town center was like, right? Buying that property. So that was.
Yes, that's right. We didn't have to buy and demo something, but we bought
Right.
it so that the city could control
Correct.
what happened to it, and
Right.
now we have a community amenity
Yeah.
instead of a big, massive garden-style apartment complex.
Yes, which it could have been, because that's what it was
That's
zoned
what it was
for.
going to be.
Yeah. Last night also, I think, was there property, if I remember correctly, off the agenda, the Downtown Development Authority,
Yes.
the DDA?
So the Downtown Development Authority transferred to the city 4 distinct parcels,
Okay,
really mainly driven by insurance. The town green
Mhm.
and bathroom is one.
oh, okay,
The parking deck is another.
right,
The Chile property that's along the town green,
right.
and the lake that's in Tech Park that Echo Lakeside backs
Yeah,
up to.
uh-huh.
The reason those 4 were transferred to the city is because those 4 parcels now have, the public is using those parcels.
Hmm.
And so now you have activity on them that you didn't used to have, or at least it would have been trespassing if you had prior
Right.
to. So, the parking deck's got cars in it all the time because
Sure.
it's been constructed. So it now is an active, the town green, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Chile parcel, we created that little trail in there to walk
To
in
come
over
from
to
the other
the Da
side.
Vinci Court and,
Right.
the Regis building. People actually use that to jog around there and stuff. And so we're okay with that. But now that we have people on it that we're not saying no trespassing, we need to be insured.
This is funny because,
So-
people don't understand that. It's like when the county creates a new park, even if it's passive, there's things you still have to do in there.
People trip and fall,
Yes,
and people sue
Yes.
when they trip and fall, even if you're like, hey, dude, that was a tree root.
right.
We didn't do
Yes,
anything, but they're like,
right.
but it was on
Well,
your
you-
property. You
oh,
should have
yeah,
removed it. You should.
yeah. Well, you're riding a dirt bike where you shouldn't be, and I got hurt and stuff like that.
Are you kidding me? I mean,
Mountain
so
bike.
one of the cities that I managed, my very first one, had an old gymnasium that they used. We used to rent for birthday parties, and it was a roller skating rink.
Oh,
So it was a
okay.
really old one. It had a little. So there were a lot of birthday parties, and we would rent roller skates.
Right.
Well, there was back-to-back birthday parties one day, and the first birthday party, on one wooden wall,
Mhm.
had taken a stapler and stapled into the wall certain things about the birthday party.
Uh-huh.
When they were done, they pulled them all off,
But left the
and this
staples.
one of the staples broke off,
Uh-huh.
and it was sticking out, maybe an eighth of an inch out of the wall. The second birthday party starts, and one of the kids, it was a little girl, is wobbly on the skates and puts her
Right.
hand against the wall and it pricks her finger. Sued the city.
Well, like for a pricked finger.
Oh yeah, that's probably not even. Okay, so we have to be insured,
Yeah, sure.
and so that's why the DDA transferred it, is because there's no
We have
need for the.
And we have trails along that lake, that's why.
Well, that too,
essentially.
and Echo Lakeside built a dock, and they have.
But that's private
kayaks.
property, right? So
Well, the dock is, but the lake, once they're on it, isn't.
I see what you're saying.
So
Okay.
you could live in Echo Lakeside,
Right,
and you go down to the Echo Lakeside dock, and you're a
Right.
resident there, and you get in one of their little canoes or kayaks or whatever,
something happens.
and you
on the
paddle out there, then
roadway.
you flip over and you drown, and your family sues the city because we didn't take, whatever precaution you think.
Well, the
So,
city and Echo Lake off of it,
yeah,
I would think, because everyone sues everyone.
that's
It's just
correct.
like,
I mean, so we've got to be protected, and
Yeah.
so that's why it was done. So, authorities like the DDA, they exist for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, it's to provide flexibility when you're doing something with the property.
Right,
Once that something is done and it's kind of in normal operating mode, the authority owning it is really, they don't generate any revenue, so that we're passing money through to
Right,
them to pay for insurance anyway. So we just brought it in house, saved money because the economy of scale of
Sure.
everything else we have to insure.
Sure.
So that's what that was about.
anything else new that you want to share?
Oh, there's lots of stuff new, but we can only do this for so
Yes,
long. You
yes,
got to get
we
on to
are-
other stuff.
We are
So
45 minutes into
Yep.
the show, so
we'll save it for next time.
yeah, let's do that. I want to thank everyone for joining us or listening to this podcast, either online or on iTunes or wherever you're finding my podcast. And I want you to, be aware of Cinebistro. Great movies there, great dinner, great dessert. Explore Gwinnett. Visit their website, exploregwinnett.org. You can find all sorts of things to do, not just in Peachtree Corners, which you can, but also other parts of Gwinnett County. But visit cinebistro.com, and you can find what's playing this weekend. Thank you for being with us, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. Thanks. Have a great day.